I'm going to be flat out honest and tell you this right off from the bat. You might hate this, you might like this, but I don't care. I will tell you what I honestly think. Rayshard Brooks was not a saint, and I find it very annoying how Black Lives Matter and these Democrats make this guy look like he is God reincarnated, right? Jesus Christ reincarnated again. I hate how these Black Lives Matter activists and these Democrats want to paint Rayshard Brooks as an innocent man who would never hurt a fly. But in reality, this man, and I tell you this right now, I looked at his criminal record, and to even look at his record, I'm disgusted at looking at what this guy has been charged of and what crimes he's committed in the past. So to even look at his record, it's nearly disgusting. But this man, as much as people want to say he defended, like, oh, well, he was shot unjustly. Oh, trust me, this man, he pointed a deadly weapon towards two officers. Now you could say, well, Carlos, it's a taser. It's a taser. It's not a deadly weapon. Well, under Georgia law, it is. It is considered a deadly weapon. And I have a few reasons, and I'm going to present to you some evidence as to why I believe Rayshard Brooks is not innocent, and why the officers who are one officer is currently being accused of murder, and he's potentially facing the death penalty for doing his job. Now, the officers, they were in the right 100%, and here's why. Now, Rayshard Brooks is no saint. From the if you look at the title I'm presenting you right now from the Sun, it reads, why he ran? Rayshard Brooks was on probation and could have gone to prison over DUI arrest at Wendy's on the night he was shot by police. Now, not only is one thing to resist arrest, because the guy clearly was drinking while he was driving, meaning he was a potential threat to anyone, and I guarantee you that if this man would have just gone on and driving around in the middle of the night and ran over a family, you wouldn't have heard of the story. You wouldn't have. But because it fits the left's narrative of a white police officer killing a black man, all the media had to run with it. But let's see what is Rayshard's criminal history, even though I already know most of it. But I'm assuming that some of you do not know about this man that the left is painting as a saint. Rayshard Brooks was on probation and could have gone to prison over his DUI arrest at a Wendy's on the night he was fatally shot by police. And I like how the article is actually painting a really modest picture of Rayshard Brooks, even though they don't show the picture of him behind a prison cell or his mugshot or the picture of the man that he really is, and that is a monster who, by all means, he actually has actually been arrested for committing a crime of violence towards children. By the way, he's actually hit children before, and not in the disciplinary way. But we'll get to that later. The 27-year-old was on probation for 4 crimes when he was found sleeping inside his car and intoxicated at a Wendy's drive-thru on June 12th, according to the Daily Mail. And then, obviously, there's a picture of Rayshard Brooks, like I said. Brooks was shot dead by an Atlanta police officer last Friday after he allegedly failed a sobriety test, took a cop's stun gun, and tried to run from authorities outside of a Wendy's. This is why he was shot. A stun gun is considered a deadly weapon in Atlanta, okay, not to mention the state of Georgia. At the same time, a police officer is allowed to use deadly force if necessary, if they are threatened with a deadly weapon. Stun guns are included. Not to mention, they're also allowed to use deadly force if they feel that they can potentially be a threat to someone else. Brooks took the officer's stun gun. He was running away with it. What if Brooks found a hostage, let's say a woman or a man, held it to his face? Now he has a hostage. What do you want the police to do? To negotiate with an intoxicated man? Reason with a drunk man who's already being violent already and has a stun gun pointed at the face of someone already? Obviously that didn't happen. But what if it did? What if the cops just say, "Oh, just let him go"? He had a stun gun. He could have easily threatened an innocent bystander. But we all know what Black Lives Matter does. Protect this man because he's a saint. He's a black man, and black people cannot do wrong by any means necessary. Spare me the lies. The dad of 4 had previously been convicted of false imprisonment, simple battery, family battery, battery simple, and felony cruelty to children, Daily Mail revealed. This guy was abusive towards his kids. Is this the guy the Black Lives Matter and Democrats want to lift up and prop up like he's a saint, like he's a role model? No. Brooks had reportedly pleaded guilty to charges dating back to August 2014. He had been sentenced to prison and violated his probation guidelines more than once. Wow, criminal breaking the law. Shocker. According to the Daily Mail, he was sentenced to 1 year in prison and 6 on probation for one count and 12 months for each of the 3 other counts. After a revised sentencing, he was sent back to prison in July of 2016 and stayed out of trouble until December of 2019 when a warrant was issued for his arrest. However, that warrant was revoked a month later. It's possible that Brooks' criminal history caused him to run from the cops as they tried to apprehend him. Police officer Garrett Wolf used a taser and fired his gun after he found the black man asleep at the wheel of the drive-thru on University Avenue on Friday night. Yeah, and so what? This man has already committed multiple crimes. He violated his parole. Not his parole, his probation. One of the conditions was you're not allowed to be convicted. Like basically, you can't have a DUI, otherwise you're violating your probation. This man didn't. Is this the man that the left wants to paint and prop up like he's a saint? Spare me. This guy did everything wrong, and the cops are now paying the price for it. Why? Because they did their job. Not. And you can say, Carlos, he's used a stun gun. He wasn't, he wasn't using a deadly weapon. Again, I will show you. According to Georgia law, a taser is considered a deadly weapon. If you aim it at someone, you're pointing a deadly weapon, and the person you're aiming it at has a right to use deadly force, if necessary, to defend themselves. So, let's go with it, shall we? Let's go with what the Daily Mail has to say. Rayshard Brooks, sorry, I got an ad. Anyway, it says, Rayshard Brooks was on probation for 4 crimes, including cruelty of 2 children, and faced going back to prison if charged with a DUI when he was found asleep intoxicated at one of these drive-thru. And it pretty much does a summary of what the other article just said. But it does say something right here. It was the fear of incarceration that likely caused Brooks to panic in the face of imminent arrest and caused him to make a break for it. If you can't do the time, then don't do the crime. This man knew exactly what were the terms of his probation. He clearly violated those terms, and when he got caught, he didn't want to take responsibility. He wanted to make a run for it. He decided to basically resist 2 officers when he knowingly broke the law. This is the problem with the current state of all minorities. They're being told, if something bad happens to you, if you break the law, it's not your fault. It's the white man's fault. Minorities, from blacks to Hispanics, are being taught that if you commit a crime, it's not your fault. Blame it on something else. But you are never at fault when you commit a crime. That is ridiculous, and it's infuriating. Be surprised how many kids I saw getting arrested by cops when I was going to those inner city schools where I live, middle school and high school alike. They were getting arrested for bringing weapons to school. And what did they say? Hey man, it's not my fault, man. F the police. The police are racist. For what? Because you brought a weapon to school? Spare me. This man is no saint. You can say, well, what about George Floyd? You're against the cops of George Floyd, but not against Brooks. Yeah, George Floyd was already apprehended. The guy was already handcuffed. He couldn't have posed a threat. But Brooks, the guy was literally resisting as they were cuffing the guy. The guy wasn't cuffed. The guy literally took a cop's stun gun and aimed it at the cop. That's a completely different scenario. Rayshard Brooks isn't a saint. But let's go with this, shall we? Did the cops have a right to use deadly force on Rayshard Brooks after he took their stun gun? Well, let's see. The fleeing felon case. In a famous fleeing felon case of Tennessee v. Garner, the U.S. Supreme Court held that under the Fourth Amendment, a police officer may not use deadly force to prevent the escape of a fleeing suspect unless the officer has probable cause to believe that the suspect poses a significant threat of death or serious physical injury to the officer or others. Boom. There you go. Why is this cop getting charged with literally the death penalty at this point? He followed the law. I'll tell you why though. The current politicians that are persecuting this officer for doing his job, they're afraid of the mob. They would rather arrest a man who did nothing wrong in order to appease the mob. Well, guess what? People are getting sick of this. It's one thing to say there's bad cops out there, sure. But there's also good cops in the force as well. And if you're out there, you're one of those people who says, F the police, the police are corrupt. How about you shut up, join the police force, and be the change that you want to see in the police force? How about that? Instead of complaining and going out and protesting, how about you join the police force and be the good cop you think other cops should be? Be the example. Set the example. That's what they taught us when we were kids, or at least I hope that they're still teaching you guys that. You want to, if you want to do something, lead by example. You want change, be that change. Don't expect someone else to do it. But apparently, Brooks is being labeled as a saint. Oh, he could do no wrong, even though he has a huge criminal record. Not to mention he was very abusive towards kids. But he's a saint. Black Lives Matter. They care about him because he's black and the cops were white. And that's all they need. That's all they need. It's pathetic. This man, I don't feel bad that he died. I really don't. You can hate me for all you want. You can say, oh, well, that's cold, Carlos. Well, guess what? This man was already a criminal. I don't feel bad for criminals. That's one thing to say, oh, this criminal was already apprehended like George Floyd. George Floyd had a criminal record too. But the difference between George Floyd and Rayshard Brooks is the fact that George Floyd was already handcuffed and he was already apprehended by the cops. And the cops continued to use deadly force on the man. Rayshard Brooks, they didn't apprehend him. He pointed a deadly weapon at a police officer. And not to mention, he was already violating a probation. Is that the point? Is that the people these leftists want to prop up as saints? Spare me. Rayshard Brooks, in my opinion, one less scumbag walking the earth. Because here's the thing. This guy, what happens if the cops don't show up and he just drives around the city of Atlanta and mows down a group of 4 people? What then? I'm pretty sure the media won't tell you about that because it doesn't fit their narrative. So in my opinion, the cop, he shouldn't be prosecuted for executing the law. Because that's what it is. That was the law. He followed the law to the letter. Rayshard Brooks, if he hadn't resisted, he would still be alive today, going back to prison. But hey, call me harsh. But this is one less scumbag who's going to be causing more harm in his community. And the cops, unfortunately, they're the ones paying it. And they're the ones paying the consequences. Even though they did everything that was described in the law. And they did their job to the letter. If you guys like this video, hit the like button, subscribe if you're new, share this with your friends, and I'll see you guys next time.